He trusted his wife blindly, until one visit to the prison revealed her darkest betrayal. The morning sun filtered through sheer curtains, casting golden squares across the hardwood floors of the Monroe residence. Ethan stretched in bed, his hand instinctively reaching for the warm body beside him. Sienna stirred, her auburn hair splayed across the pillow like spilled wine, and smiled without opening her eyes. 5 more minutes, she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. Ethan pressed a kiss to her bare shoulder, breathing in the vanilla scent of her skin. I'll start the coffee. Downstairs, he moved through their kitchen with practiced ease, the espresso machine hissing to life. Through the window, he could see their meticulously maintained garden, Sienna's weekend project that had transformed their backyard into a sanctuary of roses and lavender. Everything about their life together felt intentional, carefully cultivated, perfect. They'd been married for 7 years, and Ethan still found himself marveling at his luck. Sienna was everything he'd ever wanted: compassionate, intelligent, beautiful in ways that transcended physical appearance. As a social worker for the county, she spent her days helping people rebuild shattered lives, returning home with stories that broke his heart and reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her generous spirit. "You're thinking too hard," Sienna said, appearing in one of his old shirts, her legs bare beneath the hem. She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her cheek against his back. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," Ethan replied, turning to face her. He cupped her face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones, and kissed her slowly. She tasted like toothpaste and morning promises. Over coffee, Sienna grew quiet, stirring her cup with unusual focus. Ethan noticed the shift in her energy, the way her fingers drummed against the ceramic, the slight furrow between her brows. "What's on your mind?" he asked. She looked up, her green eyes holding something he couldn't quite read. "The agency assigned me to a new program. It's different. Prison rehabilitation, helping inmates prepare for reintegration. I'll be going to Westfield Correctional twice a week, maybe more." Ethan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "That's incredible, Sienna. Those people need advocates like you." Relief washed over her face. "You don't mind? The hours might be irregular, and some evenings." "I trust you completely," Ethan interrupted, squeezing her hand. "You're doing important work. I'm proud of you." Sienna's smile was radiant, but something flickered in her expression, something that vanished before Ethan could identify it. She stood, moving around the table to straddle his lap, her fingers threading through his hair as she kissed him deeply, urgently, as if sealing an unspoken agreement. That evening, as Ethan worked on architectural plans in his home office, he heard Sienna on the phone in the bedroom, her voice low and animated. He smiled to himself, assuming she was coordinating with colleagues about her new assignment. He never thought to question it. Trust was the foundation of everything they'd built together. And Ethan trusted his wife blindly. 6 months dissolved like sugar in water, sweet and invisible. Ethan had grown accustomed to Sienna's erratic schedule, late nights at the prison, weekends consumed by case files, the distant look in her eyes during dinner that she blamed on the emotional toll of her work. He ordered takeout on her late nights, left encouraging notes in her bag, never once doubted the narrative she'd constructed. Until the phone call shattered everything. "Mr. Monroe. This is Officer Patricia Wells from Westfield Correctional. Your wife was involved in a minor traffic accident in our parking lot. She's fine, just a bit shaken. We thought you should know." Ethan's blood turned to ice. "Is she hurt?" "Superficial cuts from broken glass. Our medical staff checked her over. She's in the visitor processing area." He abandoned his meeting, drove 20 miles over the speed limit, his mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. When he burst through the prison's entrance, breathless and frantic, the guard at reception looked up with mild confusion. "Ethan Monroe. My wife, Sienna Monroe. There was an accident." The guard checked his computer. "She's being attended to." "But sir, you mentioned she works here." "The rehabilitation program," Ethan said impatiently. "She's here twice a week, sometimes more." The guard's expression shifted to something like pity. "Sir, we don't have any rehabilitation program with outside social workers. Budget cuts eliminated that 3 years ago." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. That's impossible. She's been coming here for 6 months. Before that, she said she was preparing. Let me check our visitor logs. The guard typed rapidly, his face growing more uncomfortable with each keystroke. Sienna Monroe has been a registered visitor here for 2 years and 4 months. She visits inmate number 47283, Dominic Reeves. Usually every Tuesday and Thursday, sometimes Saturdays. Visits lasting between 2 and 4 hours. Ethan's hands gripped the counter's edge. Show me. The printed logs felt like evidence in a trial where he was both prosecutor and defendant. Page after page of Sienna's signature, check-in times, check-out times. The dates stretched back long before she'd announced her new program. Back when she'd claimed she was working late on difficult cases, attending conferences, visiting her mother. All lies. Who is Dominic Reeves? Ethan's voice sounded foreign to his own ears. The guard hesitated, then pulled up the inmate file. Former investment banker. Serving 12 years for securities fraud and embezzlement. He defrauded investors of over $40 million. He's eligible for parole in 18 months. Ethan stared at the man's photo on the screen, sharp features, calculating eyes, the kind of face that promised the world while stealing it from under you. And Sienna had been visiting him, lying to her husband, living a secret life for over 2 years. I need to see her. Now. Officer Wells escorted him through security checkpoints, each door closing behind them with mechanical finality. In a small medical room, Sienna sat on an examination table, a bandage on her forehead, her hands trembling as a nurse applied antiseptic. When she saw Ethan, her face crumbled. Not with relief, but with the trapped expression of someone whose carefully constructed world had just imploded. Ethan, I can explain. 2 years, he said quietly, the visitor logs still clutched in his hand. 2 years of lies. The nurse excused herself, sensing the electricity in the air. Sienna reached for him, but Ethan stepped back, the distance between them suddenly infinite. The drive home was silent as death. Sienna sat rigid in the passenger seat, her fingers twisted together in her lap, occasionally opening her mouth as if to speak before thinking better of it. Ethan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. He'd waited years to build the life they shared. She'd spent those same years demolishing it in secret. Inside their home, their sanctuary that now felt contaminated, Ethan threw the visitor logs onto the kitchen table. They scattered like accusations across the surface where they'd shared countless meals, morning coffees, intimate conversations that he now realized were built on sand. Talk, he commanded, his voice dangerously calm. Sienna sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. When she finally looked up, tears streamed down her cheeks, but Ethan felt nothing. Not sympathy, not love, just a cold, expanding emptiness. Dominic was my first love, she began, her voice breaking. We met in college, dated for 3 years. I thought I'd marry him. Then he went to prison, and I tried to move on. I met you. So I was the consolation prize. Ethan's laugh was bitter. No. I loved you. I do love you. Sienna stood, reaching for him, but he moved away. You gave me stability, a real life, everything Dominic couldn't. I was happy. Then why? The question exploded from him. Why spend 2 years lying to me, sneaking around, visiting a convicted criminal? Sienna's composure cracked completely. 3 years ago, I got a letter from him. He'd found me through a prison correspondence program. He said he'd changed, that prison had shown him what mattered. He asked if I'd visit, just once, for closure. And you went. I went for closure, she insisted desperately. But when I saw him, everything came rushing back. The way he understood me, the passion we'd had. With you, everything is so comfortable, so predictable. The word hung between them like a slap. Comfortable. 7 years of marriage, of building a life together, reduced to tepid contentment. So you kept visiting him. For 2 years. While I trusted you blindly, supported your demanding job, never questioned your late nights. Ethan's voice was eerily steady. What happened during those visits, Sienna? We talked. That's all. About his life, my life, what we'd lost. He's different now, focused, remorseful. The man I fell in love with is still there, under everything that happened. Did you touch him? Sienna's silence was damning. The contact visits, Ethan said, understanding flooding through him. Those logs showed contact visits. Prison romance through bulletproof glass wasn't enough, was it? Nothing happened. We held hands sometimes, that's all. There are guards everywhere, cameras. You held hands with another man. 4 hours. While I was home, waiting for my wife, trusting that she was out there doing good in the world. Ethan felt something break inside his chest, a hairline fracture spreading through everything he believed to be solid. Did you ever think about me during those visits? Did you feel even a moment of guilt? Sienna was sobbing now, mascara streaming down her face. Every day. Every single day. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't walk away from him again. You don't understand what it's like to be torn between two people. No, Ethan interrupted coldly. I don't. Because I've only ever been devoted to one person. Apparently, I'm the only one in this marriage who was. He walked to the bedroom, Sienna following, pleading, her words tumbling over each other in desperate justification. Ethan pulled a suitcase from the closet and began throwing clothes into it. What are you doing? Sienna grabbed his arm. I can't be here. I can't look at you right now without seeing every lie, every moment you chose him over me while I was building a life for us. Ethan, please. I'll stop visiting. I'll never contact him again. We can go to counseling, work through this. He turned to face her, and she flinched at the devastation in his eyes. How can I ever believe another word you say? You've been living a double life for 2 years. 2 years. Sienna. Our entire marriage is a lie. That's not true. I love you. You love the life I provide. The stability. The comfort. He spat the word back at her. But your heart? That's been behind prison walls with a convicted criminal. Ethan zipped the suitcase and headed for the door. Sienna collapsed against the hallway wall, her sobs echoing through their home. I'm getting a hotel room. Don't call me. Don't text me. I need to think about whether there's anything left of this marriage worth saving. As he drove away, Ethan saw her in the rearview mirror, standing in their doorway, illuminated by the porch light he'd installed on their first anniversary. A stranger wearing his wife's face. He'd trusted her blindly. Now, he finally saw clearly. The hotel room was sterile and anonymous. Beige walls, generic artwork, a bed that smelled of industrial detergent. Ethan sat on the edge, staring at his wedding ring as if it were evidence of a crime he'd unknowingly committed. The crime of loving too completely. Of trusting too blindly. Sleep was impossible. At 3 a.m, his mind racing with fragments of memories now tainted by doubt, he remembered something. Sienna's car. She'd left it at the prison after the accident, and the prison had arranged for it to be towed to a nearby lot. He had her spare keys. By dawn, he was at the impound lot, showing identification, signing papers. Inside Sienna's sedan, the car she'd driven to see another man hundreds of times, he searched with methodical precision. Under the driver's seat, his fingers found it, a second phone, slim and silver, hidden in a velvet pouch. His hands shook as he powered it on. No password protection, arrogant or careless, he couldn't decide which. The message history loaded, and Ethan's world collapsed for the second time in 24 hours. The texts between Sienna and Dominic stretched back months, dozens of exchanges that ranged from mundane to devastating. But it was the recent messages that made his blood run cold. Dominic, the transfer window is Tuesday 6 a.m. Torres confirmed he'll leave the East Gate service entrance unlocked. $50,000 clears everything. Sienna, the safe house in Portland is ready. I've been moving money slowly so Ethan won't notice. Almost there, baby. Dominic, how much total? Sienna, $180,000 from our savings. Enough to disappear for a while. Mexico first. then wherever we want. Dominic, you're incredible. 3 more months and I'm out. Then it's just us, like it should have been. Sienna, I can't wait. This marriage is killing me. Ethan is so comfortable, so predictable. Like living with a piece of furniture. Safe but soulless. Dominic, soon you won't have to pretend anymore. Soon we'll be free. Ethan read every message, each one a knife between his ribs. His wife, the woman who'd promised to love him until death, had been systematically embezzling their life savings to fund a prison break. She'd called their marriage soulless, called him furniture, reduced 7 years of devotion to an inconvenient placeholder. The financial evidence was damning. Transfers to offshore accounts, payments to people with criminal records, wire confirmations for a rental property in Portland he'd never heard of. Sienna hadn't just been emotionally unfaithful, she'd been planning to help a convicted felon escape, to become a fugitive herself, to abandon everything they'd built. To abandon him without a second thought. The most recent message was from yesterday, before the accident. Sienna, had a scare today. Car accident at the prison. Ethan showed up. Dominic, does he know? Sienna, he knows about the visits. Nothing else. I'll handle it. He's too trusting to dig deeper. He believes whatever I tell him. Dominic, that's why you married him. Easy to manipulate. Sienna, don't. I feel guilty enough. But yes. He never questions anything. Sometimes I wonder if he'd even notice if I disappeared. Ethan's vision blurred. The woman he'd loved, who he believed loved him back, saw him as nothing more than a convenient mark. A comfortable life to sustain her while she waited for her real love to be freed. He wasn't her husband, he was her cover story. He sat in her car for an hour, the phone in his hands, trying to reconcile the Sienna he'd married with the calculating stranger in these messages. Finally, he made a decision. Ethan drove to the nearest FBI field office. Special Agent Rebecca Torres looked exactly like someone who'd seen every shade of human betrayal. She sat across from Ethan in an interview room, the burner phone and printed financial records spread between them like autopsy results. This is substantial evidence of conspiracy to facilitate escape, wire fraud, and money laundering, she said, her voice professionally neutral. You understand that if we move forward, your wife will be arrested and charged. Ethan's throat was raw. I understand. There's no coming back from this, Mr. Monroe. Once we involve federal charges, your marriage is effectively over. Are you certain? He thought of Sienna that morning 6 months ago, announcing her prison program, the way he'd squeezed her hand and told her he was proud. He thought of every late night, every time he defended her absence to friends, every moment he'd chosen trust over suspicion. She made her choice 2 years ago, Ethan said quietly. I'm making mine now. The operation moved with clinical efficiency. Agent Torres confirmed that a guard named Torres, no relation, was indeed under investigation for suspected corruption. The pieces fit together perfectly. Within hours, they had warrants. Ethan returned home that evening to find it exactly as he'd left it. Sienna's coffee cup still on the counter, her cardigan draped over a chair. She'd texted him 17 times, each message more desperate than the last, but he hadn't responded. Now, he waited. When Sienna's car pulled into the driveway at 8, federal vehicles surrounded her immediately. Ethan watched from the living room window as agents emerged, badges displayed, reading her rights. Sienna's face cycled through confusion, terror, and finally, when she saw Ethan standing in the doorway, absolute comprehension. No, she screamed as agents approached with handcuffs. Ethan, no. What did you do? What you should have done, he called back, his voice carrying across their lawn. I told the truth. You bastard. You've destroyed everything. Dominic and I could have been happy. We could have had a life together. You've ruined my chance at real happiness. The words confirmed what Ethan had already known but needed to hear. Even caught, even facing federal charges, Sienna's concern wasn't for their marriage, their vows, or the life they'd shared. It was for the fantasy she'd been building with a convicted criminal. I loved you, Ethan said, more to himself than to her. Completely. Blindly. You were a means to an end. Sienna shrieked as agents guided her toward a vehicle. A comfortable placeholder until Dom got out. You were too stupid to see it, too trusting, too boring, too goddamn naive. Agent Torres appeared beside Ethan. We've arrested Dominic Reeves and Officer Manuel Torres as well. The escape was scheduled for next Tuesday. You prevented a major incident. Ethan nodded numbly, watching his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, disappear into a federal vehicle. Neighbors emerged from houses, their faces shocked and curious. By morning, it would be all over their quiet suburban community. The trial took 6 months. Sienna pleaded guilty to conspiracy, wire fraud, and embezzlement, receiving a 7-year sentence. Dominic's sentence was extended by 15 years. The guard received 10. Their elaborate plot unraveled completely under federal investigation, revealing even more layers of deception, forged documents, bribes, a network of accomplices. Ethan sat through the sentencing hearing, watching Sienna in her orange jumpsuit, looking small and defeated. She'd tried to catch his eye several times, but he'd looked through her as if she were glass. When she made her statement, she cried, claiming she'd been manipulated by Dominic, that she'd never meant to hurt anyone. But Ethan had read those messages. He knew the truth. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Sienna signed the papers from prison, contesting nothing. Their house sold quickly. Ethan donated her belongings to charity. He wanted nothing that bore her imprint. A year after her arrest, Ethan sat in his new apartment downtown, smaller and simpler than the home they'd shared. He'd started dating again, cautiously, learning to read signs he'd previously ignored. His therapist said he was making progress, that the betrayal trauma would fade with time. On his laptop, Ethan worked on designs for a community center, a project that reminded him that not everything beautiful was built on lies. Through his window, the city stretched out in geometric patterns, each light a separate story of joy or heartbreak. His phone buzzed. A message from Claire, attorney he'd been seeing for 3 months. Still on for dinner tomorrow? Ethan smiled, typing back a confirmation. Claire was different, direct, honest, someone who valued transparency. Their relationship was still new, still fragile, but it was built on truth. He'd learned the hardest way possible that blind trust wasn't love, it was willful ignorance wearing devotion's mask. Real love required awareness, questions, the courage to see your partner clearly rather than through the soft focus of desperate hope. Sienna had called him comfortable, predictable, a placeholder. Now, Ethan understood that his capacity for loyalty wasn't a weakness, it had simply been given to someone who didn't deserve it. He closed his laptop and looked at his reflection in the darkening window. A man who'd been shattered and rebuilt himself, piece by careful piece. A man who would never trust blindly again, but who hadn't lost his capacity to trust at all. The betrayal had revealed Sienna's darkness, but it had also revealed Ethan's strength. And that, ultimately, was worth more than any comfortable lie. The end.